Yeah, thanks for having me on your show.
So let me ask you, how would you describe the situation in Ukraine now that you've been there and you've come back to the United States? What did you see on the ground?
So the leadership is threading the needle. They have a challenge. They can't spike a lot of fear in their communities. There'd be runs on the bank, and their currency would take a hit. So they're really trying to prepare for an imminent invasion, but at the same time not, freak out investors, freak out world banks and things of that nature. So he's got a really difficult time, Zelensky does. As far as the people on the ground, they're ready to fight. I mean, it's a different country than it was in 2014. They have felt democracy and freedom, and they do not want Vladimir Putin's, authoritarianism. Every person, even Russian-speaking Ukrainians, contrary to what Vladimir Putin is saying, are saying they're going to fight.
I want to ask you about the use of sanctions. It's sort of a twofold question, because I know you have said that if Vladimir Putin moves forward, Russia should face economic sanctions that will be crippling. But now we heard this new plan coming out of the White House with a focus on oligarchs, friends of Vladimir Putin. So here's my two-part question. Is that enough to cripple the economy in Russia? And then my other question is, other part is, if it's not, why not implement these sanctions now? Why not turn up the heat now in order to discourage any further movement?
So the first part of your question about whether or not the sanctions will cripple the economy in Russia, if we do the SWIFT transactions and Vladimir Putin can't do any banking internationally, that will be crippling. The people of Russia will suffer. His buddies, the oligarchs, will definitely suffer. They will have difficulty, trading and buying things as a nation. That's going to be very powerful. Whether it deters Vladimir Putin, that's another question. And then I think your second part was about, do we do the sanctions now, or do we wait until there's an actual invasion? And that debate is ongoing in the government. I know in the Congress, there are people who have both opinions. And speaking to the Charge d'Affaires in Kyiv, she is probably the closest, to the situation there, and genuinely believes that we should wait so that we certainly shouldn't implement all of it now, because at that point, Putin says, what have I got to lose?
Yeah. Congressman, I think a lot of Americans are heartened is that there appears to be bipartisan agreement on what's happening in Ukraine. But can you explain to the American people who perhaps are war-weary, not suggesting that the United States is going into a war footing, but explain to the American people why it's important that we have bipartisan agreement on what to do with Ukraine, the U.S. interest in Ukraine, why it's so vital?
Yeah, unity is important not only inside our country, but also with our NATO allies, the EU. Everyone standing united is further deterrence to Putin taking action. So for Americans, understanding that China is watching this, despots around the world are watching this. We have a democratically elected government that had a peaceful transition in a country that loves freedom. So, of course, with authoritarianism on the move all over the world, Nicaragua, Venezuela, for Democrat countries to stand united is very important. And then one thing I would tell Americans, twice last century, we waited too late to get involved in what happened in Europe, and the conflagration went global, and it cost us massive sacrifices. So if there's a chance that we could deter Putin today, we should absolutely do everything we can to do that. Short of troops on the ground, I don't believe, and I think the administration, we're all in agreement here, American soldiers in Ukraine is not the right response. Now, with troops in Belarus, Russia is now putting troops in Belarus on the border of a NATO ally. I think the president is right to send troops to those NATO allies and make sure Putin knows that will not be tolerated, and we will adhere to our Article 5 obligation.
It's clear that the hope is that diplomacy will win the day, because the conversations are ongoing, right? We just talked about the Secretary of State meeting with his Russian counterpart. But as I'm sort of watching this, I wonder if at times it's actually in a way sort of giving in to Russia, because the conversations that are occurring between Russia and the U.S. and other NATO allies do not include Ukraine. They walked out of the Security Council meeting yesterday when the Ukrainian representative began to talk. And so here you have Russia, in a way, kind of determining the future of Ukraine without even acknowledging Ukraine as a country, an independent country.
Yeah, you bring up an excellent point. The Russians believe that Ukraine is their country. But if you look all the way back in history, it was actually the person who founded Kyiv who, after attacks from the south, particularly the Ottoman Empire, et cetera, went north to Moscow and founded Moscow. So this historical argument that Vladimir Putin is making is just wrong. And he's acting that way. I mean, Putin is the master of disinformation and gray zone warfare, or hybrid warfare, as some people call it. And I think that's what he's doing here at the UN.
Well, Congressman Mark Green, thank you so much for giving us a little bit of your time.
Thanks for having me, guys. Have a great day.